They are trying to stop black voters in Memphis from being able to elect a candidate to Congress. Tennessee has exactly one Democrat that is elected to Congress, and he is sent from Shelby County, which is home to majority black Memphis. Now, this is where the black people have been able to use their collective power to elect a candidate that represents them. But how many candidates do they want black people to elect out of Tennessee? 0. And since the Supreme Court just gutted the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the state government is actively taking away the power from these black people. Now, I need you to understand, they know it's much easier to take away the power of the black vote than to actually take away the black vote. You see what I'm saying? See, there are many who want the number of black votes to be 0. But taking the power away from the black vote means that you can meet the same need with a lot less controversy. So the Tennessee Republicans just passed a congressional map that would carve up Shelby County so that black voters are split up and can't combine their votes to elect change makers on their behalf. And why? Because if black people vote together, they're going to force a Democrat into office. And again, how many candidates do they want black people to elect? 0. This is anti-black, and I support the protesters in Tennessee.
Tennessee now have no representation. While nobody was watching yesterday because everybody's focused on cruise ships and everything else, the Tennessee GOP got together and redistricted, eliminating the last place where people of color in the state of Tennessee had any voice. And this has been their plan for years. See, this started back in 2022 when Tennessee redistricted after the 2020 census, and they took District 5 in Nashville and split that into 3 different districts, the 5th, 6th, and 7th. Essentially, they took the population of Nashville, which has a significant minority population, and they divided that into 3 other districts and basically segregated them into other more rural voting districts. And by doing that, Republican Andy Ogles won the 2022 election and eliminated that seat for Democrats. And that left Memphis. Now, Memphis is still the only seat in Tennessee with a majority black voting population and a Democratic-held seat. So yesterday, again, while nobody was paying any attention, they divided Memphis now and split that voting population into 3 districts. And why is Tennessee doing this? Well, for 2 reasons. They want to eliminate the black voice in the state of Tennessee, and because the Supreme Court told them that they could do that in Calais versus Landry. See, that Supreme Court decision actually altered the Voting Rights Act, which was in place to ensure that minority voters, that their votes were not diluted, that they had a voice. And those protections were weakened by that decision, and Tennessee didn't waste any time to say, okay, we have one more district that black voters have a say in, let's make sure we eliminate that district. And Tennessee GOP leadership even told you what they were doing when they said the goal was to ensure that the state's representation reflects its conservative values. See, instead of trying to become a better party that everybody in the state would want to support, they eliminated the last 2 districts where the values of those communities were not the same as GOP values. And as the Tennessee Black Caucus has said, and I agree with, this is black vote dilution at an industrial scale. So when you hear MAGA creators on this app say that having something like the Voting Rights Act is actually racist, they're full of crap and trying to justify this. Remind them this is why that act existed, was to make sure that black voters had a voice. Now in Tennessee, they don't.
This image is going to be in history books. A black Tennessee state representative named Justin Pearson was physically blocked from attending a meeting involving the district that he was elected to represent. We can see the sergeant at arms on the right there blocking the doorway, refusing entry to this state representative. This was a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing regarding a highly controversial redistricting plan. The sergeant at arms blocked Pearson at the door. He was kept outside and forced to watch the proceedings on his phone. The meeting was about a map that fractured the majority black 9th Congressional District, the last one in Tennessee, and the same area Representative Pearson represents. The redistricting plan, which unfortunately passed, carves Memphis into 3 separate majority white districts. Republicans even said the goal was to maximize partisan advantage to support the national GOP's congressional majority. Here's why this is so ridiculous. Memphis is 62.9% black. They're recognized as the largest majority black city in the United States. Now they have 0 representation because Donald Trump is terrified that he's...
Black members of the Tennessee House just had to watch their colleagues pass a new map that erases the only majority black district in the state.
Please clear out the balcony. Leader Lamberth.
Black people make up almost 20% of the population in Tennessee, and now every single district in the state is majority white, which not only eliminates their votes completely, but it also eliminates the only Democratic U.S. House district in the state. This is a direct result of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act. This is the entire reason we needed it in the first place. Also, if you know who this one white woman is who stood up with him and linked arms, please tell me, because that is what it means to be an ally. If you want more information about this is a great article. And also, if you haven't, please follow me on Instagram. The link's in my bio because TikTok has been weird lately.
What happened in Tennessee today was shameful, a shameful display of racism and voter suppression, with the legislature there voting to really restrict the voting accessibility to African Americans in that state. A state that has a pretty big African American population. There is no longer an African American majority district in the state. They voted to redraw all of those lines, and there's no longer a Democratic majority in the state as well. The interesting thing is, you may say, well, that's how it works, that's how everyone does it. Lawmakers were smiling, walking down the stairs today after the vote, smiling and laughing at protesters who were outraged, and also at least one of them, chanting Trump, Trump, Trump. We have gone back to the pre-civil rights era in this country, definitely pre-voting rights. That's where we are in America right now. Everyone should be outraged and concerned.
A good part of the reason that the Tennessee legislative maps are racist is because black people have not had freedom of movement. And I'm not just talking about redlining and restrictive covenants and that sort of thing. If you want to get caught up on that, I suggest you go read the excellent but plotting The Color of Law. There were quite a few cases where for black people to keep housing and have their voting rights, they had to consolidate either in cities in the South or they had to migrate north or west. One of the most famous instances of this was in West Tennessee, in Fayette and Haywood County. And if you look at Tennessee, I'm going to do the Michigan thing, okay? All right, this is Tennessee. Memphis is right here in the corner. Fayette County is right here beside Shelby County. Haywood's up here. So the very tip of western Tennessee that's not Shelby County. This is the Tennessee Delta. So there are lots of people who were either formerly enslaved or later on the descendants of formerly enslaved people. When the Civil Rights Act of 1957, so this is before the Voting Rights Act, but when it came out and started allowing more people to register to vote, there were a number of black sharecroppers, I believe it was 257, that were turned off of the land that they had lived on for generations and sharecropped on because the white landowners did not want them to have voting rights. A black landowner in the area named Shepard Tolles allowed people who had been kicked off land that they had lived on for generations to come and stay on his land temporarily, as long as they needed to. It was called Tent City. It lasted about 2 years. It became a major flashpoint for activism over voting rights. 3 gas chains, Texaco, Esso, and Gulf, I believe, would not deliver oil or gas to one of the stores of the supporters of Tent City. So the NAACP called for a nationwide boycott of these chains. The AFL-CIO published a pamphlet in support, calling them fighters for freedom. The expulsion eventually backfired on the white landowners because it actually encouraged more black people to register to vote. So they had to get more creative in the way that they were restricting black voting, like changing the way that they redistricted things, which in part led to the Voting Rights Act. All that is to say that black people have not historically had a choice in the South as to where they can live, but both because of redlining and because of things like the history of sharecropping and people getting kicked off their land. This has led to the inability in many cases, or at the very least, a difficulty in creating generational wealth, in creating physical mobility for people to move from one area to another. And so when you restrict an area and break it into thirds, like they did with Shelby County, it is inherently racist because you're ignoring the history.
Tennessee Republicans are trying to redraw congressional maps right before the midterms.
And critics, including myself, say that this is a direct attack on Black voting power in Memphis. And then as a reminder, Tennessee already completed redistricting after the census, so this is a mid-decade redraw. So Tennessee lawmakers just advanced a new congressional map that would split Memphis and Shelby County into multiple Republican-leaning districts. So critics say the goal is clear: weaken the voting strength of Black communities and eliminate the state's only Democratic-held congressional seat. So from a legal and civil rights standpoint, this matters because Memphis has historically been Tennessee's largest Black political center. So when you fracture that voting block across several districts, you reduce the ability of Black voters to elect candidates who represent their communities. So Republicans say this is about fair representation and balancing districts. Opponents, like myself, are calling it racial gerrymandering and voter dilution ahead of the 2026 midterms. And timing matters here. Nationally, Republicans are facing growing concerns about losing control of the House and potentially the Senate. So this is happening while Trump is facing historically low approval ratings and increasing public scrutiny over repeated public appearances that critics and even some former allies are saying they raise concerns about cognitive decline and fitness for office. And then against that backdrop, critics are arguing these redistricting efforts are about protecting the political power before the next election cycle. So that all sounds procedural until you look at the real world impact. Congressional maps affect who controls federal funding, healthcare priorities, education policy, and committee power. These maps are not just lines on paper, they determine political influence for entire communities. So the next step is likely lawsuits. Civil rights organizations are already preparing legal challenges, arguing that this map unlawfully dilutes Black voting power. But here's the problem. Elections can still move forward while courts sort this.
I think we also have to understand that Black Americans have faced barricade after barricade after barricade in front of them forever for voting. So to take a majority Black district like Memphis and split it up, pull it into three separate sections so it goes into rural Tennessee, if you aren't familiar with the state, they're taking a Black district and stretching it out so that the white voters overtake the Black voters in those three districts. That's deliberately trying to make one party have no representation. It is an abuse of power. We should say that. This is not just a Black voter problem, because if anyone thinks their vote should count, this is a problem. This is starting with Black voters, but it'll carry on to all of us. The bottom line is Trump and the MAGA Republicans are losing. People are not happy with how they are running the country. So they are desperate to control the outcome of elections by stripping away their opponents' power piece by piece, particularly in the South, where they have the most control. We need a national ban on gerrymandering. It doesn't matter what party we have. Any law that limits who can vote, how they can vote, if their vote is counted, is wrong. We need fair, nonpartisan maps. Take a grid to the entire country if you have to. We shouldn't have what happened in Texas, in Florida, in Oklahoma, and yes, in California and Virginia. That should not be happening. It should be fair, and if you are someone that believes that your vote should count, you should be angry. You do not have to be a Black American for this to happen, but you should be angry on behalf of Black Americans that it's happening to them again.
Here you have it, guys. To be honest, my Black folks, we all know what is actually happening. Number one, this is just what is happening right now in Tennessee, in Memphis. It's just like a tug of war between the Democrat and the Republican. We all know Trump is a Republican. And if we are being honest to ourselves, we know Trump's hand is in this. Because how come you just wake up one morning and cut out the only Black states that can legally vote? The Supreme Court just woke up one morning and said no more. He doesn't want them. I watched some of the videos of how these members, how they were being ushered out. It was so painful. It was really painful. And we all know that President Trump wants to be re-elected, whether we like it or not. And he knows that once he's not re-elected, he will be questioned about the EP files. So he's doing everything he can according to what people are saying, to prevent this. And then the black folks are not happy because how dare you just wake up one morning and say, oh, the Supreme Court have said, oh no, in Memphis, this state and this state, you guys can no longer vote. This is cutting out democratic right of people. And this state happens to be the black folks that lives there. So directly or indirectly, you are saying the black people can no longer vote in election in this state for this position. It doesn't even make sense. Like, guys, it doesn't make sense. And if you think, oh, because, and I know right now the MAGA supporters, they will be all joyful and say, oh, well, they did the right thing. It's not nobody's fault. You guys should not forget that. Tomorrow it can be you guys, because if they start now, this is them just trying to hold people back from their voting rights, and it can happen to the white folks too. It shouldn't just be all about the black folks. In fact, the black folks, right from time immemorial, they have been suffering. They have been treated like slaves in their own countries. Most of these people, all their ancestors are from America. You would call them African Americans. They've asked you guys to stop calling them that because most of them, they don't even have any relative in Africa. So America has been their home. Now you holding back their rights to vote. This is just slave trade 101 back to where the formation is. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, guys, some people said Trump has an agenda. We don't know what is going to happen. Anyway, guys, you guys just drop your comments down below for us to talk. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think about what's happening in Tennessee. Is it right? Is it fair to the black folks? I'll see you on my next video.